Hi, geography students. It's Mrs. T, and I hope all of you have either already completed your test 3 or you're working busily to finish that up before 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Please text me if you have questions. I'm here to work with you anytime, and so make me work for you. Reach out and let me know what's going on and what I can help you with, and if there's anything that you need so that you can get that 100-point test turned in to me. So this is week 12. We're beginning our last chunk of class that we're going to work on between now and the end of the semester. Sometime during the first full week of May, you will have your fourth test. I'm going to call it a test since that's the way I'm going to format it instead of the project format after I got your feedback, and most of you preferred the test format to the way that I formatted Project 1. So on the syllabus it says Project 4, but it's going to be Test 4. Think of it that way. So sometime during the first week of May we'll have Test 4, and it's going to cover some or all of 3 chapters in the textbook. Chapter 10, 11, and 12. I say some or all because we're going to go slowly, we're going to pace ourselves, and I'm not just going to pack a whole bunch of content into the week just for the heck of it, because I want y'all to be exposed to this information, obviously, to learn this information and relate these concepts from geography class to the other classes that you're taking and the professions that you're going into. But I also don't want to cause too much stress from just geography class with all of the things that are coming at us from every direction, from bad weather to the coronavirus to learning how to homeschool our kids to losing our jobs in a lot of cases, or at least getting furloughed and having lower income, maybe missing some bills, looking for our stimulus checks and that kind of thing. So I want you to be successful in geography class, so we're just going to pace ourselves and go kind of slowly. This unit, chapter 10, 11, and 12, is about development. It's about global development and a comparison between what we call wealthy nations and what we call impoverished nations. I want to say wealthy nations instead of rich nations because there's a difference in term here. Wealth means that it's something that you own or control, something that can be passed from one generation to the next. In terms of a nation, let's think of a generation as being a century or so, where you can keep the value, keep the investment, keep the income or productivity within the wealth of all of that. You can keep the benefit of that within your nation to benefit the citizens or corporations, as we will see in this unit, and you can pass that from one century to the next so that those nations stay wealthy. Rich is a much more temporary word, and you'll hear in some of the videos that I'm going to have you watch the word rich being used a lot to describe the abundance of resources that are available in some of the poorest countries of the world. And rich in this case is correct because they might have those resources now, but they don't feel any of the benefit of it over the long haul because of some dynamics that we're going to be learning about in this development chapter or unit, let me say, because chapter 10 is about development, chapter 11 is about agriculture and the really stepping stones that agriculture creates to bring about industrialization, and then chapter 12 is about industrialization. So I'm going to, in this video and the short videos that are sort of documentaries, short length documentaries that I'm going to have you watch for the other lessons this week, week 12, we're going to talk about development and a comparison of nations across the world, and think about this in a lot of the same way that we have thought about the organization of cities in our urban geography chapter, where you have different sectors or zones in that city that are designated for different purposes, like a central business district or an industrial zone or low-income worker housing or gated communities and wealthy areas where people can build walls and keep out certain influences that they don't want to bleed through into their area of a city, or the suburban areas. So think of those concepts of like sectors or zones, and we're going to expand that. We're going to blow that up sort of to apply across the world, and we're going to maybe think about countries as sectors, or countries as being organized in zones, or countries as being wealthy, or the citizens and corporations that exist in a country as being wealthy, compared to citizens or lack of corporations, lack of industrialization or development in some countries, where they might be rich in natural resources, rich in copper, for instance, or rare earth minerals that are necessary for so many high-tech devices that we have, like our handhelds and smartphones. So we're going to look at that kind of distribution across the world and ask the question, still about social stratification, but on a global scale: why are some countries and the people within them wealthy? And why are other countries that have the potential, that have richness available, why are those countries not able to take advantage of that richness, and instead that richness is kind of, what's the word I want to use? Grabbed, snagged by other people or corporations. Corporations are people according to a lot of government policies. So, what are the dynamics there? What are the government policies? What are the world corporate relationships that create this huge difference in wealthy nations and impoverished nations? Okay, so there are three key terms in your textbook. I want to point you to your textbook on page 290. It looks like it is. The three key terms have letters, have initials that we usually refer to them as: the GNP, the GDP, and the GNI. So the GNP is the gross national product. And this is a monetary measure that's used often to rank nations in comparison to each other. So here you can tell that we're still talking about social stratification, because I said there's a rank that we use to compare different, in this case it's not categories of people, in this case it's countries of the world in comparison to each other. So gross national product is an interesting way to measure countries of the world, because it is the sum total of everything that is produced and the monetary value of everything that is produced, not just within the nation itself, but by the citizens and corporations that are headquartered in that nation. So if, for instance, you live in Switzerland, like one of the documentaries you're going to watch next week, if you live in Switzerland, but you own copper mines in Zambia, then the income that you produce in Zambia is considered part of the Swiss gross national product, because you are a citizen or you are a corporation that is housed there, or headquartered is a better word, there. And so there's one example about how some countries, Zambia is one of the top, it's sad to put it this way, but the top 20 poorest countries in the world. That's like not something, a list that you want to be in the top 20 of, but it is, even though it's one of the places that develops, that sounds like it's willing. It's one of the places that enables other people and corporations and nations to maintain and increase wealth over the generations. So the richness that's available in that nation does not remain inside that nation to help increase the lifestyle, help increase the education level, the access to wellness care, the access to just longer lifespans, and in general more advancement opportunities in life. So there are so the gross national product, GNP, is a key term that you will hear used a lot in these videos that you're going to be watching about the different theories and the different processes that some people have predicted or proposed can apply to the difference, how wealthy nations become and stay wealthy, how underdeveloped or developing nations can become wealthy nations over time. You'll read in your textbook, Walt Rostow is the name of one of the theorists who came up with modernization theory is the name of his concept. It's a 5-stage theory where it looks at a country's level of development toward industrialization, moving past subsistence agriculture to industrialization in order to become a wealthy nation. A lot of capitalism and industry is involved in that kind of process, and it's basically talking about, it comes from the premise of being able to keep richness within a country and exploit the richness for the benefit of the country, the citizens, and the corporations within that nation, instead of sending that richness out to make wealthier areas wealthier and prolong their wealth and that standing in that ranking of countries in comparison to each other. So gross national product is an interesting concept to look at because it can be misleading if you're not aware that it involves the income and the production capacity outside the borders of a nation. It's got the word gross national product in it, but it's outside the borders of a nation where a lot of that production and a lot of that income capacity comes from. Okay, so another concept that you'll read on page 290 is the gross domestic product. So when you hear the word domestic product, you're talking about within the borders of the nation. So here you're looking at what is produced income-wise, items, commodity-wise, what is produced within the borders of the nation by the people and the corporations that produce things within the borders of the nation. So one of the things you might be hearing about in the news over the next couple of years in the USA is increasing our gross domestic product, because right now a lot of the items and the consumable goods that people in the United States purchase are not produced within the United States. And there's been a lot of discussion during this coronavirus crisis about bringing production back to the shores here, because there's a lot of hiccups, I guess you should say, or even abrupt stops in the supply chain right now when we're talking about shipping things from other countries, in particular China, from China to the shores here, where a lot of the consumable products that are in our homes right now, and when we go to Dollar General or Walmart or any of the places that we shop, you can turn over the bottom of your plastic cup or whatever it is that you're buying and look to see where it was made, and many, many, many products have a label made in China. Well, that does not, we're buying it here, but it does not contribute to our gross domestic product because it wasn't manufactured here. And so there's another nuance that you're going to need to listen for when you're looking at these other videos that I have posted in our class for you to watch as part of this lesson about development and global stratification. Okay, and then another term from page 190 is the gross national income. So this one is tricky again. I mean, some people like it a little bit better because it includes more than just what is produced and sold. It includes investment income. So this goes past production and industrialization and looks at investments like stocks and bonds and commodities and futures and all of these different things that honestly I know very little about, but probably your economics and your finance teachers can tell you a lot more than old Mrs. T can. But these investments are not really things that are produced. The dynamics of currency valuation and the dynamics of how much a corporation might be worth today, it might go down tomorrow or it might go up tomorrow, and so that increases income for the people who own that stock, but it also increases income in terms of tax revenues, in terms of tariffs in some cases, in terms of a lot of government policies and nuances that, again, dear old Miss T doesn't understand very well from a political science or policy point of view. But gross national income includes more than merely what is produced or what is mined or what is harvested from a place. It includes also those kind of digital exchanges that are really part of the world economic system, but not considered as a variable in that gross national product or gross domestic product calculation. So these are some complicated calculations, I know, and I'm not going to ask you to know precisely what these calculations are or all the variables that go into them, but you need to be familiar with these terms because we're going to watch a series of videos that I did not make myself, but there are short lessons that are better really than what I could do for you in explaining these complicated topics about the dynamics between developing nations, underdeveloped nations, and developed nations, the relationships between corporations, which are considered people in a lot of cases, the relationship that corporations have to the governments where those corporations are headquartered, and the way those corporations can interact with other governments, where maybe resources that they're interested in or resources that not just that they're interested in, but that they need to earn wealth are located, and what happens when those resources are harvested. So there are many different theories that are presented in this chapter about the ways in which countries of the world interact with each other regarding their economic position. I've mentioned one of them already, modernization theory. There's also concepts that we can use to classify countries in our minds. I've used them already and you've heard them before. The levels of development, like a developed nation such as the United States and most nations in Europe and Australia. Those are the wealthy nations. They are called developed because they have a great deal of infrastructure. They have highly designed or honed or well-established social institutions, which means that the society is organized and can rely on, for instance, an electrical grid is one of the institutions that we rely on heavily in the United States to be successful in business. Wastewater management, sanitation, a lot of the things that we talked about earlier on in the semester when I used the word infrastructure. This word infrastructure is one of the social institutions that can enable a country to succeed or to fail. If you don't have clean water resources, if your transportation system is unreliable or absent, if your communications system is unreliable or absent, if your education system is unavailable to a huge sector of a country, you are very unlikely to be able to quickly move to a developed status among nations of the world. You are very likely to be underdeveloped or developing in that process. So we're going to look at levels of development. We will also look at something called world systems theory that you might see a little bit of similarities concept-wise, but definitely organization-wise, between the world systems theory graphic that you'll see, which is concentric circles, and that concentric zone model of a city where you had a core business district and then things that existed on the outside that were related in some way to that core. And so world systems theory is another idea. Emanuel Wallerstein is the name of the sociologist who developed that concept, and he identified core countries, which are developed countries, wealthy countries, and looked at the way those countries interact and depend on or exploit countries that are in a periphery or around, around that core, or a semi-periphery, maybe closer to that core. So for instance, very, very impoverished countries in Africa would be in the periphery, and in the semi-periphery, maybe a country like Mexico, where there's a lot of things assembled and put together, maybe not so much produced immediately in Mexico for export, but we see a lot of things, not only with a label, turn that cup over and see that sticker on the bottom that says made in China, but you'll see a lot of stickers or notices, a label inside your clothes or something that said assembled in Mexico, for instance, or some other Central American country. So this unit is very interesting, and it gets way more complicated, and it relies heavily on your ability to think back to the beginning of the semester and think about things like religion, and how does religion play a role in behavior not only on the micro scale in our social identity, but also there are going to be aspects of how religion plays a role in the wealth or poverty of nations that might surprise you when you see this in one of the videos, more than one, but definitely one of the videos that, that you're going to watch. Think about cultural identity, think about the zones of wealth versus poverty within urban geography, and also as we get more into this economic discussion, you'll be able to bring in politics from chapter 8 and look at policy and how industry and agriculture and development are affected by policies. It's very, very interesting. It's hard not to be ethnocentric in a lot of these situations that we're going to study and look at in this unit. Sometimes students get kind of angry in this unit, honestly, because there's a lot of exploitative behaviors that are going to be exposed on the macro scale exploits that corporations and even nations around the world engage in that contribute to the vast differences in wealth and poverty among the nations of the world. It makes some people pretty angry when you're going to learn about tax shelters or how do you avoid taxation on billions of dollars worth of income and this kind of thing. Well, I'm right there with you being mad about these kinds of things, but being mad about it doesn't help. Really, it's your job as the leaders of tomorrow to go into fields where you can be a decision maker and a policy maker and bring about change, or at least do what old Mrs. T is doing and try to expose folks to this knowledge right here in Central Arkansas, when we might not necessarily ever even think about a country like Zambia or a country like Honduras or Taiwan or any of the other places that we will learn about in these last few weeks that we have together before our finals. So, I did not use the whiteboard today. I rattled off a whole bunch of stuff that hopefully I went slowly enough for you to pause it and write stuff down. But you definitely need to review this video really quick and write down the key things like gross national product, gross domestic product, gross national income. Look in your textbook and make sure that you can write a concise definition for those things. Look at the section in chapter 10 on modernization theory. Look at world systems theory. Also, structuralism is a school of thought that one of these videos in particular is going to look at and kind of use to analyze global stratification in terms of capitalism and capitalist policies being at the root of why there is so much inequality among nations of the world. So read the first few pages, I would say 15 or so pages of this chapter, which are going to be covered in the next two videos that you'll watch for week 12. Choose a reaction paper topic from this video that we've had together, or one of the other two short videos that you need to watch to round out week 12's topics. And this is also where you will get quiz questions from your first 15 pages of chapter 10, this video, and the other two. So make sure that you put on your calendar reaction paper Saturday at noon, quiz Sunday at noon, and that's going to be our pattern for the next couple of weeks until our last week of class during the first week of May is when that occurs, when we will have our project/test 4, and I will bid you farewell with all of the wonderful knowledge that we've gotten together this semester with cultural geography class. So text me with any questions that you might have. My cell phone is not busy enough. I don't hear from you as often as I would like, in other words, so please reach out with any kind of questions or comments, and I look forward to seeing you very soon, if that is going to be possible before the end of the semester. Take care.